Is your favorite watch brand lying to you? Well, it's time to find out. You've probably heard of acrylic, mineral, and sapphire. One of these three crystal types is fitted to most watches on the market today. Acrylic is cheap, but scratches easily. Sapphire is virtually impossible to scratch, but is the most expensive, while mineral falls somewhere in between. Over the years, some watch companies have abandoned these standardized materials in favor of proprietary alternatives. Most of these obscure crystals have imposing names and are bragged about by their respective manufacturers as being new, innovative materials, yet little is really known about their performance. Until today, that is. I've got hold of a Mohs Hardness test kit, as well as a variety of watch crystals to conduct our own semi-scientific research. This kit comes with 4 double-sided picks, numbered from 2 to 9, referring to the Mohs hardness scale. Basically, the harder a material is, the higher numbered pick you'd require to scratch it. For example, wood has a hardness rating of 1 to 1.5, so even the softest number 2 pick will scratch it without issue. Knife blades, however, have a Mohs hardness rating of about 5.5, meaning picks 2 through 5 aren't hard enough to cut it. You'd need to use something with a strength of 5.5 or higher to scratch it. In the case of this test kit, that would mean pick number 6 or above. Pick number 9, the hardest in this kit, can scratch pretty much everything except for diamond and a couple of other extremely rare compounds whose Mohs ratings supersede 9. I'll be using these picks to see at what number each of these crystals begin to scratch, so we can determine which are the most scratch resistant and how they each measure up against their respective marketing promises. We'll then also test them with some more day-to-day objects that your watch may come into contact with. If you want to grab one of these test kits for yourself, I'll leave an affiliate link in the video description. First, a quick rundown of the competitors and what they claim to offer. Acting as controls, we have a piece of standard acrylic, mineral, and sapphire glass. We then have the proprietary alternatives, each stripped from well-known timepieces to ensure their authenticity. First up, K1 mineral crystal. K1 has been used for years and doesn't appear to originate from a single supplier, though American conglomerate 3M makes glass bubbles of the same name, so perhaps they're related. Most sellers describe this as heat-treated mineral glass, which is much harder and more scratch-resistant than standard mineral glass, though others such as Devosa say this is actually made by grinding rather than heating. Some even advertise it as the best of both worlds when it comes to dial protection. On their side, Devosa assigns this a Mohs hardness rating of around 6 compared to the 4 of regular mineral. My particular sample was taken directly from an Iron Annie quartz watch, which is what Junkers are often known as here in the UK. Next up, Hardlex. Now you might know this one because Hardlex is the crystal often used by Seiko in their non-luxury watches. It's generally known to be a type of hardened mineral crystal, though I couldn't find any documentation from Seiko themselves. I emailed them to see if they could give me more information, and they eventually got back to me with the following. Hardlex is a proprietary formula inorganic tempered glass. It is tougher than mineral glass or acrylic. So not a very detailed response, but they're not claiming anything too extreme either. Then there's Sapphire-Coated mineral crystal. This is a mineral crystal which has been laminated with a layer of sapphire to improve its performance. This is currently used in some watches produced by Swiss manufacturer Victorinox and their sub-brand Wenger. Some users online say these are virtually scratch-proof. To my understanding, this material went under the name of Sapphire when it used to be used by Seiko in, I think it was the late 90s or early 2000s. It'll be interesting to see how this one stacks up, as information about it is hard to come by. I've pulled this unit straight from a Wenger dress watch. There's no shortage of information about flame fusion crystal. In the words of Invicta's Shop HQ guest host Ryan Johnson, flame fusion crystal is their own type of crystal that incorporates both mineral and sapphire crystal, and boasts the impact resistance of mineral as well as the scratch resistance from sapphire. Invicta even puts the slogan "Invincible in detail" on its packaging, if that's anything to do with the crystal. Interestingly, the first commercially successful method of manufacturing synthetic gemstones like sapphire was known as flame fusion. Does that mean that flame fusion crystal is actually sapphire? Or is it just a misleading nickname used to describe a coated mineral crystal? We'll see how it compares during the scratch tests. I removed this one from an Invicta aviator watch. The final contender comes in the form of Krysterna, the crystal used exclusively by American brand Sterling and its subsidiary Akribos. Sterling makes many bold claims about this material, marketing it as a clearer, smarter sapphire. They also say it's more durable than mineral glass, and when it comes to delivering maximum preservation and protection, nothing comes close to Krysterna. We'll see if Sapphire's got something to say about that. It's rumored online that this is just yet another coated mineral crystal. Oddly, despite being marketed as their in-house material, Sterling says they created it via the Verneuil process. Forgive my pronunciation. This is the same as Invicta's Flame Fusion crystal and regular synthetic sapphire. I'm intrigued to see which of the three scores the highest, or are they all just going to be the same? This sample was taken directly from the Sterling Winchester that I reviewed not too long ago. I'll give you a moment to decide which you think is going to be the winner. Okay, there's your moment. Have you got an answer in your head? I'm recording this before testing any of them, and personally, I'd be surprised if many of them were significantly better than Mineral, let alone comparable to Sapphire like some of them claim. One watch that does boast Sapphire is the Depth Charge Diver from our sponsor WatchShop. You see, WatchShop is prepping for its giant Black Friday sale event, where they've got unbeatable deals on a huge range of watches, most of which are available for international delivery. Not only do they have all of your favorites in stock like Hamilton, Seiko, Casio and Citizen, but they also produce some in-house lines such as Depth Charge, which I reviewed back in 2021. That piece was incredibly well built for the money, with a steel case, Seiko automatic movement, sapphire crystal, ceramic bezel, and 200 meters of water resistance for a stupidly low price. They've since added more to the diver lineup, including larger 43mm versions if you're after something bigger. To get in on the action this Black Friday, head to watchshop.com to get up to 70% off during the Black Friday event. And as a Ben's Watch Club viewer, you can use code BF30 to get an additional 30% off selected lines. That's an unbeatable deal that you're not going to find anywhere else. Right, so let's start the itchy and scratchy show, shall we? Actually, there's a couple of things I've noticed before we get into this, and that's the tone of some of these proprietary crystals when you view them from a side-on perspective. You see, standard mineral crystal has got a very obvious blue greenish hue to it when viewed from the side like this. Sapphire, on the other hand, is, if anything, maybe a slight yellow hue, but it's pretty much translucent. The Krysterna and Hardlex both have a slight bit of that mineral hue, especially the Hardlex here. You can see it's got that blue hint to it. The Krysterna, similar but to a lesser extent. Whereas the Sapphire-Coated and Flame Fusion crystals both look a lot more like Sapphire from side on at least. The Flame Fusion perhaps the most out of all of them. Unfortunately, the K1 crystal, despite my best efforts, just wouldn't budge out of the case. And as such, we're gonna have to test it with the case on, and I couldn't see exactly what it was like from the side. Okay, let's begin. All crystals waltz through pick 2 with no issues, 2 being plastic after all. In a surprise to nobody, acrylic begins to scratch at level 3, the copper tip being a harder material than plastic. These are only light scratches at this stage, so they should be able to be buffed out with Polywatch. So acrylic was the only one to fall at number 3. Let's just check, yeah. Far deeper scratches are evident at level 4, meaning we can remove acrylic from this contest. The rest of the contenders survived pick 4 with no issues. At 5 is where things should start to get interesting. A few websites have mineral crystal down as measuring only a 4 on the Mohs scale, despite others having it at level 6. So we could see some action now that we've moved up a tier. Let's take a look live. I can feel something, but there's no visible scratches. Yeah, despite feeling some resistance to the pick, mineral crystal didn't showcase any notable damage at level 5. The rest of the competitors were even less affected, with no wear whatsoever. Okay, we must be getting close now. We're moving on to pick number 6, which I believe was the rating that some websites had standard mineral down as, so let's see if there's any scratches. Looks like they might have been right. Now, I'm not sure you can really see that, but I can definitely feel increased resistance there. I think there is some light scratches. Yeah, you can just about see it there on that main shot. Just about starting to show some marks there. Surely Sapphire will walk this. Yeah, no resistance at all. While most others passed this level, I noticed an identical amount of friction from Hardlex, K1 and Krysterna, though there wasn't anything visually notable. There was also an outlier in the form of the Flame Fusion crystal. Yeah, it's odd. I feel something. I think we are getting scratches out of that, or it feels like there's some sort of chip in the, oh yeah, you can definitely see that. We've definitely got some scratches there at level 6. It was unusual. It almost felt like we took chips out of it rather than it being a traditional scratch, but immediately, it's odd, around those 2 scratch points, I can't get it to scratch, but in those particular areas it just scratched immediately, so I'm not sure if there's weak spots, I'm not sure if it's how the crystal's constructed, I really don't know. Given the inconsistent type of scratching, I decided to test it again at level 7. Now at level 7, we should start to see some major scratches in some of these, so let's see how we get on. Yeah, so mineral's definitely starting to scratch fully here at level 7. So I think from now on we can rule this one out. Still absolutely nothing on the Sapphire. Felt a bit of resistance last time with Hardlex. Let's see. Again, I can feel a fair bit of resistance, but there isn't a great deal of visible scratching again. Yeah, you can see some faint lines under the 7, but I'd say that's still a pass. Oddly, Flame Fusion Crystal slightly outperformed K1, Hardlex and Krysterna here, despite having dodgy results way back at level 6. Again, some of these scratches are still quite small. It seems to have survived slightly better at level 7 than level 6, although I think there's more smaller scratches on level 7 and fewer deeper scratches on level 6 for whatever reason. We've already made a small mark here, which you can see. It's funny with these crystals, you really can like take a chunk out and then other areas don't scratch. I'll probably keep it in for one more round because it has done better than standard mineral. Sapphire-Coated again. Yeah, really not getting any sort of bite there whatsoever. Quite impressive. Krysterna. Yeah, definitely getting some resistance there. Please ignore the adhesive from the sellotape, but outside of that, no real visible scratches here. So far, all these proprietary materials have survived at least one level higher than mineral, which is better than I was expecting. But I think level 8 is where we're really going to separate the men from the boys. Yeah, even at level 8, absolutely no resistance from the Sapphire, no bite, not a sign of a scratch. Seiko's up next. That's scratching just like mineral scratch at level 7. Overall though, not as bad a showing as I was actually expecting for that one. But yeah, I think we can definitely discount this one from the list. K1 barely survived level 7. Surely this is a foregone conclusion. But yeah, that is just scratching readily. Just like Hardlex. Very similar material overall from the feeling of it. So yeah, easily scratching a level 8. Maybe not quite as deep as Hardlex, but still very obvious. So we're going to eliminate this one from the competition. Next up, Sapphire-Coated Crystal. This one's done pretty well so far. Let's see if we begin to get any scratches at level 8. Yeah, so this is definitely the first time that I've felt resistance from this crystal so far. It's not deep scratches. We've got visible light scratches, but it's certainly better than K1 or Hardlex. Here you can see it if you look closely. We'll keep it into the next round to see how we get on with pick number 9, but now we've got Krysterna. Let's see how we get on here. Felt a bit of resistance at level 7, so I'm not expecting good things. Yeah, that's definitely immediately worse than the Sapphire-Coated Crystal. I can feel again we're just taking chunks out. It's like there's scratching in patches. Feels exactly the same as the Hardlex and the K1. I mean, you can hear it for yourself. To be honest, I'm not really sure what Sterling were bragging about. Doesn't seem any better than any other hardened mineral crystal, at least from what I can tell here. And disappointingly, it's done worse than the Sapphire-Coated Crystal used by Wenger. We've also got confirmation here that it definitely doesn't do better than Sapphire, let alone Sapphire-Coated Crystal. So we can remove this one from the competition. Next up, the similarly marketed Flame Fusion Crystal. This one's described as the best of both worlds, so let's see if it can compete with Sapphire. The scratches on this are probably slightly less deep than Hardlex or your Krysterna or your K1, but there isn't a great deal in it. It's still, I can still feel myself taking small chunks out of the material here. We'll see how this one goes with the number 9 pick, to see if it's substantially different. It's the final countdown. Let's see if we get any marks on Sapphire with number 9, or we'll see if it actually can resist this. Aha. So we are finally getting some very mild scratches potentially here. I can feel slight resistance, just like Hardlex felt at number 7. That's how Sapphire is feeling at number 9. But overall, still pretty impressive. We've got Sapphire-Coated Crystal against Flame Fusion. So far, at number 8, Sapphire-Coated definitely held up slightly better. But no, that is instantly deep scratches we've got here at level 9. So it might be coated in Sapphire, but at least from the looks of this test, it doesn't perform as well when it comes to scratches. I'll keep that one to the side and we'll see how Flame Fusion does in comparison, see if we get a similar effect. So yeah, once again, this is performing pretty similarly to the Sapphire-Coated Crystal. If anything, it doesn't scratch as frequently, but then when it does, the scratches are much deeper and much more obvious. This Flame Fusion definitely is not as good as regular Sapphire. Yeah, out of the proprietary options, I'd say your Sapphire-Coated is probably the winner. But even then, compared to Sapphire, there really is quite a disparity between the two. Here's a tier list going from S down to D, S being the most scratch resistant and then D being the one that performed the worst. Obviously our lowest performer here is Acrylic, so that's no surprise to anyone. While you can buff Acrylic with Polywatch to get rid of loads of light scratches, it's still clearly the least scratch proof on this list. This one exhibited light scratches at level 3 and then heavier ones at level 4 and upwards. I'd put Mineral in the tier above. It is substantially harder than Acrylic, with deep scratches at level 7. Surprisingly, all of these proprietary alternatives did perform better than Mineral. Unfortunately though, most of them aren't a great deal better. K1, Hardlex and Krysterna all performed extremely similarly in my tests. It wouldn't surprise me if these were almost an identical material across the board. Most had light scratches at level 7 and then deeper scratches at level 8. Now I'm going to chuck in Invicta Flame Fusion Crystal here too. I guess you could say this one was more consistent in a way. It performed better at level 8 with less deep scratches, but did scratch as low as level 6 for some reason. So I wouldn't say overall it's a better performer. Then a step above, we're going for the Sapphire-Coated Crystal. Now I'd say here the difference between A and B is probably a bit bigger than the difference between B and C. Sapphire-Coated Crystal performed pretty well until level 8, at which point we started to get some very light scratches, and then the deeper scratches started forming at level 9. Still, it wasn't as good as our only S tier candidate here, which is unsurprisingly Sapphire-Crystal. Yeah, no matter what the manufacturer might tell you, it's clear from my tests at least that Sapphire performs better than Sapphire-Coated Crystal, at least when it comes to scratches. Even at level 9, Sapphire was only having very light marks that you probably wouldn't be able to see. Outside of Acrylic, which easily scratched, the other options all had no issues combating the key, with no marks on any. Next up, a craft knife. Remember, accidents always happen. With more pressure, the craft knife could probably go straight through the Acrylic. Now with Mineral here, there isn't really any visible scratches, but I will say there is some resistance, no doubt. There might be some very light scratches here that aren't visible with the human eye, but overall it's still pretty decent. Hardlex is still pretty good. Krysterna. Ooh, I can definitely feel resistance there, very similar to K1. Yeah, there's definitely still something there. It's pretty disappointing compared to what's put online. But at the end of the day, it's not super visible anyway. Here's another coated crystal, this time the Sapphire-Coated Crystal. Now that's just silky smooth. Whereas the Krysterna, if we go back to that for a second, you can see minor scratches here. Flame Fusion, pretty smooth to be honest. There's not much resistance there. So that's interesting. The knife must be slightly sharper than one or two of them picks, even though it's the same or lesser hardness. While I did feel some resistance with the K1, the regular Mineral, and I think it was the Hardlex too, there's nothing really visible on the surface left, whereas with the Krysterna, there was some very minor scratches visible. Now this test doesn't take into account impact resistance. I think I need much more complex setup to try that out. But for day-to-day encounters where you're more likely to scratch the watch, then Sapphire is still the go-to choice. If any of these companies are making claims that their material is better than Sapphire in some way, I find it hard to believe them. How did these results stack up to your predictions? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see some fancy case materials tested, let me know down there too. For the full pros and cons of the main 3 glass types, check out this video on screen right now, where I cover all the basics for beginners.